in the book of Revelation, which describes the end or describes the finality of all things, or the totality of all things, is maybe a way for people who are more secular to kind of understand it. And in that book, there are two interesting images about technology. One is that there's a dragon that falls from the heavens, and that dragon makes a beast. And then that beast makes an image of the beast, and then the image speaks. And when the image speaks, then people are so mesmerized by the speaking image that they worship the beast ultimately. So that is one image of, let's say, making and technology in scripture, in Revelation. But there's another image, which is the image of the heavenly Jerusalem. And that image is more an image of balance. It's an image of the city which comes down from heaven with a garden in the center and then becomes this glorious city. And it says, the glory of all the kings is gathered into the city. So the glory of all the nations is gathered into this city. So now you see a technology which is at the service of human flourishing and takes the best of humans and brings it into itself in order to kind of manifest. And it also has hierarchy, which means it has the natural at the center and then has the artificial as serving the natural, you could say. So those two images.
How's it going, everyone? I wanted to do a video today because I was inspired by watching a Jordan Peterson, Jonathan Pageau interview with Jim Keller, who's a legendary microprocessors computer architect, and they're talking about AI and the future of AI. So watching that, I was just thinking about all the Peter Thiel videos where he's talking about technology and his thesis of stagnation and where we're at in that regard. And so I've just taken some time to compile some video clips and some text to just present a little bit of a thesis on that, on just the current state where we're at, thinking about technology and what we might need to do to prepare ourselves for to better relate with technology and our each other in the future. So to do so, we're going to start by reading Matthew 25, 14 through 30. The parable of the talents. For it will be like a man going on a journey who called his servants and entrusted to them his property. To one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, to another 1, to each according to his ability. Then he went away. He who had received the 5 talents went at once and traded with them, and he made 5 talents more. So also he who had the 2 talents made 2 talents more. But he who had received the 1 talent went and dug in the ground and hid his master's money. Now after a long time the master of those servants came and settled accounts with them. And he who had received the 5 talents came forward, bringing 5 talents more, saying, Master, you delivered to me 5 talents. Here I have made 5 talents more. His master said to him, Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a little, I will set you over much. Enter in the joy of your master. And he went, and he also who had the 2 talents came forward, saying, Master, you delivered to me 2 talents. Here I made 2 talents more. His master said to him, Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a little, I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master. He also who received the 1 talent came forward, saying, Master, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you did not sow, and gathering where you scattered no seed. So I was afraid, and I went and hid your talent in the ground. Here you have what is yours. But his master answered him, You wicked and slothful servant. You knew that I reap where I have not sown, and gather where I scattered no seed? Then you ought to have invested my money where the bankers, with the bankers, and at my coming I should have received what was owed with interest. So take the talent from him and give it to him who has 10 talents. For to everyone who has will more be given, and he will have an abundance. But from the one who has not, even what he has will be taken away. And cast the worthless servant into the outer darkness. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. So next we're going to take a look at a recent video by Peter Thiel, where he is giving a thesis on where we're at culturally, thinking about technology, It's another layer, a new layer to his thesis of technological stagnation.
All right. I heard you the other day, you said that we now find ourselves between Scylla and Charybdis. Narrow, Greek mythology, narrow, straight. Scylla is a six-headed monster over here, and Charybdis is the whirlpool over here. And in Greek myth, you had to navigate between these two, each of which was deadly. You described our Scylla and Charybdis, actually, and here's what you said in a recent paper that you wrote. The stable deterrence structures of the Cold War look much shakier as more countries acquire nuclear weapons. It seems far easier now than at any time since World War II to sleepwalk into an all-out conflict. So the prospect of Armageddon, let's call that Scylla. And here's Charybdis, an endless stagnation. I'm quoting from the same paper. We have grown attached to our soft, comfortable ways, but we do not want to name what they are protecting against. How bad, of course what I have in mind is the war in Ukraine. How bad is the Scylla, the prospect of Armageddon?
Well, the thing that I want to say that's always nuanced and complicated is that it's quite bad, but we have to also weight it against the alternative. And
Yes.
The extreme alternative is the sort of soft totalitarianism, a society that simply is locked down where nothing happens. If you were to use the biblical terminology, it's the Antichrist, the one world totalitarian state, and there's always a sense where I think we should be at least as scared of the Antichrist as of Armageddon, and then certainly my contrarian intuition is that people are far more worried about Armageddon than they are worried about the one world state, and I would at least like us to worry about them equally, to worry both about Scylla and Charybdis.
Okay, so elaborate a little bit.
There are all these different versions of it. There's a recent paper by
The Armageddon we sort of talked about at the opening.
Well,
the Armageddon is we pursue science and we pursue technology, and it could all blow up in a nuclear war.
And then let's elaborate it. So,
Yes.
so if you don't if we're going to stop that, you can't just stop it locally. You have to stop it globally. You have to make sure that all scientists stop it. You have to make sure that they're being policed all over the world. And if there's some small piece of computer code that can lead to a runaway AGI, we need to have surveillance technology installed on every single laptop to make sure that people aren't typing in keystrokes to code up the AGI that's going to destroy the world. Or if you can, the nuclear weapons issue already from the 50s and 60s, what came with this multinational atomic energy agency that was going to, International Atomic Energy Agency, that was going to sort of monitor all these countries, and you needed a supranational structure with real teeth. And in practice, we ended up with something in between. We ended up with some kind of global superstate. It wasn't never quite that much. It was maybe not quite enough to fully stop Armageddon. It was never quite enough to be totalitarian. But those have been the bad alternatives for 77 years, and we need to find some way in between.
Okay, and the lockdown. We fear Armageddon too much.
We only talk about it strikes me we almost only talk about the Armageddon stuff, and we never talk about the sort of regulatory political lockdown that's the practical alternative, where everyone's just scared of their own shadow.
So if we put it, I'm trying to bring growth back into this. To pursue growth means in one way or another to have the courage to risk a certain degree of new innovation. We unleash technology and science again to produce growth, correct?
Yes.
All right. So, and why do you and I, because we have known each other a long time and think alike in some pretty basic ways, we both say growth and assume that that's a good. But let's make that explicit. Why do we need growth? What does that do for American society? And why is the American, what happens, or the other way around, what happens to us in the absence of growth?
Well, we had, the Club of Rome wrote this book called The Limits to Growth, 1972, almost exactly 50 years ago. And it basically said that, the growth couldn't continue, and so we had to get used to a zero growth world. First, a world of zero population growth, then a world of zero economic growth. And there are all these ways that their agenda broadly has been implemented over the last 50 years. And it has, in some ways, perhaps it's stabilized the world, but it's also been profoundly destabilizing it's led to a world that's extremely nihilistic. It's led to the sort of cultural disintegration of the middle class, where you think of the middle class as the people who think their children will do better than themselves. And there's sort of all these ways the zero growth world hasn't worked out that well. So my intuition is that it's not simply stable. This is where I disagree with Doubt, that it's not simply decadent or simply stable. It's not simply entropic. It's ultimately, there's ultimately a catastrophe on both sides.
So,
and there's an Armageddon catastrophe if you have unconstrained tech and science where no one's paying attention and people are just pushing buttons and seeing what happens. But there's also always a risk of a centralizing totalitarian catastrophe on the other side, which is the natural solution on how do you stop all science and tech. Is you need a one world state with real teeth,
which is within our grasp, the humanity's grasp, as AI emerges.
Well, it's an answer to the nuclear problem. It's an answer to the environmental challenges. It's an answer to the AI challenges, and I would just submit it's not a good answer.
All right. So
that's a good description there. We're going to continue on and take a look at an essay that Kristen de Montfort wrote on Peter Thiel. It's a really great essay, and I'll include it in the description along with all these other videos, called Mr. Thiel's Appeal. And I'm just going to be reading two sections from it that are quoting from Thiel. This one is just to kind of describe a historical reference to technological growth. So this is from Peter Thiel's book 0 to 1, Notes on Startups or How to Build the Future. It's so here we go. New technology has never been an automatic feature of history. Our ancestors lived in static, zero-sum societies where success meant seizing things from others. They created new sources of wealth only rarely, and in the long run they could not ever create enough to save the average person from an extremely hard life. Then, after 10,000 years of fitful advance from primitive agriculture to medieval windmills and 16th century astrolabes, the modern world suddenly experienced relentless technological progress from the advent of the steam engine in the 1760s all the way up to 1970. As a result, we have inherited a richer society than any previous generation would have been able to imagine. Any generation excepting our parents and grandparents, that is. In the late 1960s, they expect this progress to continue. They look forward to a 4-day work week, energy too cheap to meter, and vacations on the moon. But it didn't happen. The smartphones that distract us from our surroundings also distract us from the fact that our surroundings are strangely old. Our computers and communications have improved dramatically since mid-century. That doesn't mean our parents were wrong to imagine a better future. They were only wrong to expect it as something automatic. Today, our challenge is to both imagine and create the new technologies that can make the 21st century more peaceful and prosperous than the 20th. So I'm just going to read another section here. And this is from a speech that he gave entitled, You Are Not a Lottery Ticket. Money is a means to an end, because there are specific things you want to do with money. In an indefinite world, you have no idea what to do with money, and so money simply becomes an end in itself. So, and he would describe where we're at now as an indefinite world. We don't know, we have no vision of the future, what to do with technology. Getting back to the last video, we only see it as apocalyptic, because of the nuclear technology. We see nuclear weapons as a danger, so we don't pursue nuclear technology. Just as maybe like the mRNA vaccine, you can see that as something new and great for humanity. But there's also that side where we connect it to the Wuhan lab of some kind of bioweapons lab or something. So it's just we have this dark apocalyptic side thinking to our technology, so it prevents us from thinking ahead to how it can really transform the world. So in an indefinite world, you have no idea what to do with money, and so money simply becomes an end in itself, which seems always a little bit perverse. You just accumulate money and have no idea what to do with it. That seems a little bit of a crazy thing to do, but I think that's actually what happens a great deal. To illustrate one way this flow might happen, if you start a successful business, you sell the company or sell shares to investors in an IPO. You make some money. Question, what do you do with the money? You have no idea, because no one knows what to do with anything, and so you give the money to a large bank to help you do something. What does the bank do? It has no idea, so it gives the money to a portfolio of institutional investors. What do the institutional investors do? They have no idea, and so they all just invest in a portfolio of stocks. Not too much in a single stock ever, because that suggests you have opinions or you have ideas, and that's very dangerous, because it suggests that you somehow are not quote unquote with it. And then what to do with the companies, and what do the companies do that get the money? They've been told that all they should do is generate free cash flows, because if they were to actually invest the money in specific things, that would suggest the companies had ideas about the future, and that would be very dangerous. This is a bit of an extreme picture, but in effect, it's a hermetically closed loop, and at the end of the day, no one's doing anything real with the money. It's completely abstracted. People actually have no idea what to do with the money. The last big idea people had on what to do with money that was not sort of circular was to buy houses and to invest in housing, and that was the idea of the last decade. That idea has gone out of fashion. Now that people no longer want to buy houses, they have absolutely no idea what to do with the money. There's some sense in which this system of indefinite optimism is gradually running out. There's a way in which the natural drift is for something from finance to insurance. There's a way in which Buffett was precedent and ahead of the curve and reoriented most of his businesses towards insurance companies in disguise, which is sort of the world of indefinite pessimism. We can sort of see how this indeterminacy affects us in very, very many different fields. If we look at politics in an indeterminate world, the most important position in politics is the pollster. What do you do in politics? Nobody has a clue. But what you do is you take a poll, and that poll tells you what to do. They don't really tell you anything on a long-term basis, but they sort of tell you incrementally what you do at a given time. And as we track towards a more and more indeterminate world, there's a way in which poll taking has become more and more dominant. And so the way we talk about political campaigns and elections, how people are doing in the polls, much more than what the ideas they're talking about. If Martin Luther King were here and said, quote, "I have a dream about a future that's really different," end quote, the question would be, how does that poll? That's the sort of way we avoid this. Let's see here. Should I read the next part? Yeah, why not? Anyone who reacts, and this is Kristen, anyone who reacts that this speech is evidence that excess money should be redistributed is missing the point here. This is not at all to say that there are no mismatch between the haves and have-nots, that there are people who can afford to throw away food and do, and people who have to scrimp and save for every scrap of food they have. That is an undeniable reality. But the point that is made here is that the simple redistribution of money, whether from the newly minted entrepreneur to the banker, or from the same person to the government and back to the single mother struggling to get by, is in and itself a failure of ideas. We and the single mothers too, and all the too many downtrodden of the earth, absolutely deserve to live in a society that gives us more than that. Absurdly high quality healthcare should be stupidly affordable and easy for everyone. Food should be nutritious, delicious, and inexpensive. Buying a house should be a little more investment than buying a car. But we keep shuffling money around from person A to person B to persons Y and Z, crossing our fingers behind our backs that we sure hope the gravy train keeps a coming as we whistle past the graveyard, or we can start thinking much bigger and do things like invest in prefab houses, 3D printed homes, lab grown meat, urban architecture, smart mirrors, or AI assisted depression treatment. All right, so we're now going to get into this video that I mentioned in the beginning that inspired this video. Jordan Peterson and Pageau's talk with Jim Keller, who's again a legendary computer architect and microprocessor engineer. And in this video, he's going to talk about how AI and humans can relate to each other, and how a good society would relate to each other in the intellectual spaces, and how in that good society we self-regulate, and comparing that to our society now and how we self-regulate.
I could recommend Ian Banks as an author, English author, I think. He wrote a series of books he called the culture novels. And it was a world where there was humans, and then there was AIs as smart as humans, and AIs that were dumber than humans, but there were some AIs that were much, much smarter. And they lived in harmony because they mostly all pursued what they wanted to pursue. Humans pursued human goals, and super smart AIs pursued super smart AI goals, and they communicated and worked with each other, but they mostly, they're different. When they were different enough that was problematic, their goals were different enough that they didn't overlap.
Because one of the things
that would be my guess is like these ideas where these super AIs get smart and the first thing they do is stomp out the humans. It's like, you don't do that. You don't wake up in the morning and think, I have to stomp out all the cats.
No, it's not about...
The cats do cat things, and the ants do ant things, and the birds do bird things, and super smart mathematicians do smart mathematician things, and guys who like to build houses do build house things, and everybody, the world. There's so much space in the intellectual zone that people tend to go pursue in a good society. Mm-hmm. Like, you tend to pursue the stuff that you do, and then the people in your zone, you self-regulate, and you also, even in the social stratus, we self-regulate. Right. I mean, the recent political events of the last 10 years, the weird thing to me has been, why have people with power been overreaching to take too much from people with less? Like, that's bad regulation.
But one of the...
So there, I guess we can see or think about how the space, the overregulation keeps people from exploring new frontiers, and how that is causing this distress in society now, where things are becoming more zero-sum. This next video is going to be Jonathan talking about the biblical relation to technology, and then Jim's going to elaborate a little bit further on the relation between AI and humans, and what that would look like in a good society.
Well, when you think
it's
about the
happening,
two
but-
waves, there are two actually in the book of Revelation, which describes the end or describes the finality of all things, or the totality of all things is maybe a way for people who are more secular to kind of understand it. And in that book, there are two interesting images about technology. One is that there's a dragon that falls from the heavens, and that dragon makes a beast. And then that beast makes an image of the beast, and then the image speaks. And when the image speaks, then people are so mesmerized by the speaking image that they worship the beast ultimately. So that is one image of, let's say, making and technology in Scripture, in Revelation. But there's another image, which is the image of the heavenly Jerusalem. And that image is more an image of balance. It's an image of the city which comes down from heaven with a garden in the center, and then becomes this glorious city. And it says, the glory of all the kings is gathered into the city. Like, so the glory of all the nations is gathered into this city. So now you see a technology which is at the service of human flourishing and takes the best of humans and brings it into itself in order to kind of manifest. And it also has hierarchy, which means it has the natural at the center and then has the artificial as serving the natural, you could say. So those two images seem to reflect these two waves that we see, and this kind of idea of an artificial intelligence which will be ruling over us or speaking over us. But there's a secret person controlling it. Even in Revelation, it's like there's a beast controlling it and making it speak. So now we're mesmerized by it. And then this other image. So I don't know, Jordan, if you ever thought about those two images in Revelation as being related to technology, let's say.
Well, I don't think I've thought about those two images in the specific manner that you described, but I would say that the work that I've been doing, and I think the work you've been doing too, in the public front, reflects the dichotomy between those images, and it's relevant to the points that Jim has been making. I mean, we are definitely increasing our technological power, and you can imagine that that'll increase our capacity for tyranny and also our capacity for abundance. And then the question becomes, what do we need to do in order to increase the probability that we tilt the future towards Jerusalem and away from the beast? And the reason that I've been concentrating on helping people bolster their individual morality to the degree that I've managed that is because I think that whether the outcome is the positive outcome that in some sense Jim has been outlining or the negative outcomes that we've been querying him about, I think that's going to be dependent on the individual ethical choices of people, well, at the individual level, but then cumulatively, right? So if we decide that we're going to worship the image of the beast, so to speak, because we're mesmerized by our own reflection, that's another way of thinking about it, and we want to be the victim of our own dark desires, then the IA revolution is going to go very, very badly. Yeah. But if we decide that we're going to aim up in some positive way and we make the right micro decisions, well, then maybe we can harness this technology to produce a time of abundance in the manner that Jim is hopeful about.
Yeah, and let me make two funny points. So one is, I think there's going to be continuum. Like the word artificial intelligence won't actually make any sense soon, right? So humans collectively, like individuals know stuff, but collectively we know a lot more, right? And the thing that's really good is in a diverse society with lots of people pursuing individual, interesting, ideas, worlds, like we have a lot of things, and more people, more independence generates more diversity. And that's a good thing where, totalitarian society where everybody's told to wear the same shirt and like, it's inherently boring. Mm-hmm. Like the beast speaking through the monster is inherently dull, right? Like, but in an intelligent world, where not only can we have more intelligent things, but in some places go far beyond what most humans are capable of in pursuit of interesting variety. And, I believe the information, let's say intelligence is essentially unlimited, right? Like the unlimited intelligence won't be this shiny thing that tells everybody what to do. That's sort of the opposite of interesting intelligence. Interesting intelligence will be more diverse, not less diverse. Like that's a good future. And your second description, that seems like a future worth working for and also worth fighting for. And that means concrete things today. And also, it's a good conceptualization. Like I see the messages my kids are taught, don't have children and the world's going to end. We're going to run out of everything. You're a bad person. Why do you even exist? It's like these messages are terrible. It's the opposite is true. More people would be better. We live in a world of potential abundance, right? It's right in front of us. Like there's so much energy available. It's just amazing. It's possible to build technology without pollution consequences. That's called externalizing costs. Like we know how to do that. We can have very good, clean technology. It would do lots of interesting things. So if the goal is maximum diversity, then the line between human intelligence, artificial intelligence that we draw, you'll see all these kind of really interesting partnerships and all kinds of things, and more people doing what they want, which is the world I want to live in.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, in that video, you see a directionality of where we can aim ourselves. And in this next one, Jim's going to elaborate on fighting for that.
so,
That's what
but again,
they
this is
tried to do, didn't they?
Yeah, and this is where thinking people have to say, yeah, this is a serious problem. Like if humans don't have anything to fight for, they get lazy and a little bit dopey in my view. Like we do have something to fight for, and that's worth talking about. Like what would a great world with distributed and human intelligence and artificial intelligence working together in a collaborative way to create abundance and fairness and like some better way at arriving at good decisions than what the truth is. That would be a good thing. But it's not, well, we'll leave it to the experts and then the experts will tell us what to do. That's a bad thing.
Yeah.
So that's
Well, so the model that you just laid out, which I think is very
I'm
interesting.
somewhat optimistic about that.
Yeah. Well, it did happen on the computational front. I mean,
It's happened a couple times both directions,
Okay.
right? The PC revolution was amazing.
Yeah.
Right? And Microsoft was a fantastic company. It enabled everybody to write a $10, $50 program to use,
Yeah.
right? And then at some point, they're also, let's say a difficult program company, and they made money off a lot of people and became extremely valuable. Now, for the most part, they haven't been that directional in telling you what to do and think and how to do it. But they are a money-making company. Apple created the App Store, which is great, but then they also take 30% of the App Store profits, and there's a whole section of the internet that's fighting with Apple about their control of that platform, right? And in Europe, they've decided to regulate some of that, which that should be a social, cultural conversation about how should that work.
Yeah.
So do you see the more likely, certainly the more desirable future is something like a set of distributed AIs, many of which are in personal relationship in some sense, the same way that we're in personal relationship with our phones and our computers, and that would give people the
And distributed
chance to
platforms is
fight
really
back, so
good.
to speak, against the
And there's lots of people really interested in distributed platforms. And one of the interesting thing about the AI world is, there's a company called OpenAI, and they open source a lot of it. The AI research is amazingly open. It's all done in public. People publish the new models all the time. You can try them out. There's a lot of startups doing AI in all different kinds of places. It's a very curious phenomena.
Yeah. There are two.
And it's kind of like a big, huge wave. It's not like you can't stop a wave with your hand.
Yeah.
So the future, how to navigate between the tyrannical and apocalyptic poles might be to the aim, like I was saying before with the last video, is aiming towards diverse distributed systems and fighting for that. But and again, like our thinking about our technology, is definitely making us way too focused on the negative sides of all of this, where we need to just open it up. And we'll get into how we might do that a little bit later, and actually starting in this video. But here in this Paul Vanderklay video, he's going to be talking about how when we're talking about technological progress and society, that there's utopian ideals that get thrown in there by culture, especially people controlling the culture at the highest levels of society. And when there are crisis moments, as there always have been, that those times are used, violence is used in those times to eradicate or to build the utopian future, as a different way to progress, quote unquote progress, to move forward. And that's why I think Thiel advocates so much for technological progress, because, and in all areas, not just computers, but in the biological sectors and everything else, because if things stagnate, things become way more zero sum, and then these kind of crisis moments come up, and we have times like now where we have elites who are saying, look how bad things are. We need more control to make things better. But I'll get into this video so they can elaborate more.
His thesis is that religion was actually what we developed to address violence, okay? A pervasive violence that was always threatening to destroy society and destroy each other. And Rene Girard pushes it back so far to say, basically with human beings, because when we come out of the womb, we're so weak for so long that, in fact, for humanity to survive, we had to develop religion for human people to actually have time to grow up. And that if humanity didn't have religion, it never would have gone anywhere as a species, because we simply would have destroyed ourselves. But now, here we are in the 21st century at the brink of destroying ourselves. And we all look around at this time and date and we think, oh, wow, this is a new thing. We're at the threat of destroying ourselves. But actually, if you go back through history, humanity has always felt itself at the brink of destroying itself. And the answer to the question of destroying itself was religion. Now, part of Rene Girard's observation with respect to communism there is brilliant, and it should be overwhelmingly disturbing for a romanticist modernist era that likes to imagine that human beings are somehow good and nice at heart, and in fact our violence and our evil is only an aberration from our normal state. What Rene Girard and what the Joker, and in fact what we are beginning to suspect underneath the surface is that this programming that Eric's brother Brett keeps talking about, that we have to simply transcend, that we might not be able to do it. In fact, even all this talk of transcending it might itself simply be a trick by the wealthy and the powerful to, the hermeneutic of suspicion applied, by the wealthy and the powerful to get what they want at the expense of the masses. That's what's beneath the surface. And that's what Joker, as a revelation, as a disclosure, as an apocalypse, reveals to us that, oh, you're hoping that the victims of our society can rise up and be the new benevolent kings? Hurt people. That's a truism too. The real mystery may not be where does the evil come from. The real mystery might be where does the kindness come from? Where does the self-restraint come from? Where does the order come from? Where do we get the source to stop our avarice, not to indulge it? And Rene Girard sees this and knows this. And so, of course, Girard has influenced Thiel now, and quite deeply, obviously. But let's go back and hear what he says again, because his observation here that communism lost its oomph when the blood stopped. The Aztecs would have known this. Societies, Sun Tzu, isn't it Sun Tzu that says you already know when a nation will lose war depending on what's happening in the temple? The book of Ezekiel knows this. What happens in the temple bleeds out into the rest of society. There must be ritual, there must be sacrifice in order for society to live, in order for violence to be abated, in order for us to stop.
Yeah, so there's another directionality of where we should be thinking. Where does the self-restraint come from? Where does the kindness come from? And so, yeah, I mean, that can be applied to every area of life, but, just another directionality with we're thinking about technological growth, thinking about the future, diverse, distributed, kind, self-restraint. Yeah, but in that video, it's a really great one because it's like, where do we get this self-restraint from? And we'll get into that maybe just a little bit more at the end. But this next one, going back to that other Thiel video, he's going to talk about a little bit about politics and how we might be how talking about these complex issues is important, and I'll just elaborate on it a little bit more once we listen to it.
I'm quite open. I don't know exactly what you're supposed to do in terms of having a more concrete agenda.
I thought you were going to.
No, I
have a blank page here where you were going to fill it in.
I think we have to look. I think, I always think the right broadly is it's a very ragtag rebel alliance. It's like we have diversity on our side. It's like Star Wars. It's Chewbacca and Princess Leia, and we have some Asperger-like C-3PO people.
The Rebel Alliance.
And Han Solo. It's the Rebel Alliance, and the other side is in lockstep. They're the Imperial Stormtroopers, and there are a lot of disadvantages to the Rebel Alliance. But one advantage is we don't have to have all the answers right now. We can admit we haven't figured it out, and we're gonna have a vigorous debate in the next few years to figure it out.
We're talking.
So there's that word diversity again, and the rigorous debate to figure it all out. Right before that, I think he's talking about they talk about foreign policy and how it's efficient to not speak about anything in terms of foreign policy. And when he said that, it's interesting juxtaposition between what he just said there. But I was thinking that this is not to say anything about people on the left or the left in general, like in terms of their end thinking or something like that, but just the way things are now with them. The left doesn't talk about anything, and they have their dogma, and it has power behind it, and it's efficient, and just go along with it, and it supports this type of apocalyptic and tyrannical framework of our culture right now, where we just don't talk about anything. We don't have ideas about the future, what's highest, so we just don't talk about it. It's efficient, it works, it goes along. And so I thought it was just an interesting, that was an interesting clip there, where he said, it's not efficient, but we're talking about these things, and that's the way to go about it. Is like, I think that's how we find, we're all working together to figure out what's good and what's right, and where we should be aiming, and to make things self-restrained and in the tyrannical aspect, and good and distributed and diverse. So we'll get into the next clip here. The next clip is we're actually going to be getting to how we can think about this, and what it's a Jonathan Pageau video, and where he was alluding to before, there's a hierarchy in the good side of technology. In when thinking about it biblically, there's a hierarchy, and so he's going to elaborate here on that aspect of hierarchy and how it's a pattern of our world. So just in a way that helps us to think about how we can think about the aims of our technology and where we should be going.
Right. I think you can't, especially if you understand the what I proposed at the outset, which is the inevitability of attention and relevance in the problem of how things exist. And so we're not talking about the material causes of things when we're talking about that. It's like we're not also denying them. We're not saying that it's all a magical world, of imagination. The world has, let's say, the world as we experience it has certain constituents, and those doesn't deny any of the scientific realities that people discover. But it's contained within the symbolic world. It's necessarily because humans care for a definite amount of things, and in a hierarchy. And so it's like humans, how can I say this? A good way to explain it would be humans can care about NASA, taking pictures of deep space. They can care about that, but they better care about that less than they care about eating and sleeping, because you'll die again. Like, there's a hierarchy of care, and that hierarchy of care manifests itself constantly. And so the same would be like, even in terms of scientific research. So you can research things like that, for example, like what stars are made of, and humans can care about that. But if you do that and then you stop like doing research that is about what humans care about in the most immediate way, then you're going to break everything. Things are going to break, and people are going to revolt, And so it's like there's just a normal hierarchy of care that people ignore. It's just about getting back into your body and realizing the world you really live in, and realizing that I can believe that the earth revolves around the sun, but it's more important that the sun comes up in the morning, because that organizes my day, and it organizes all of society. And people are, most people are awake during the day and most people sleep at night. And that's basically the pattern of everybody and everything that functions in the world. And so if you mock, if you say something like, it's an illusion, right? The sun coming up in the morning is an illusion. What's really true is that the earth, the earth is turning on itself, or that the earth rotates around the sun, or whatever. Like, the precession of the sun in the sky in terms of seasons, it's an illusion, right? All of this type of thinking. This is where people fall into nihilism, and where they don't realize the world they live in. They just don't realize that you can say that as much as you want, but you can't stop the fact that that the sun, coming up in the morning and going down at night manages your world.
And if you've never seen or experienced Jonathan Pageau's work, it's a great introduction there about how fascinating he is. Just to get go further on this, how to think, where to put our attention in terms of guiding the future. I'm going to look at this clip from another Paul van der Klee video.
Why the why of existence, as far as I can tell, is to give of life is to give the middle finger to entropy.
Existentialist Grizz.
Of life, the why of existence, as far as I can tell, is to give of life is to give the middle finger to entropy. It's like we're gonna live anyway. It's
Yeah. Well, did you watch any of the Peter Pan stories that we?
Okay, I'm going to jump ahead a little bit. I actually, on the Vanderclips channel, assembled something from this talk, taking out a few things.
I'm not speaking for anybody else, but what I found is something like try to seek some sort of higher power that works with me, that I'll be able to understand to some degree, and live in service to others, and make a decision not to throw the towel in on that deal. And that seems to be the only thing that really has worked. I mean, it doesn't erase the terror that sometimes bubbles up. It doesn't erase, resentment for things done in the past. It doesn't erase all that stuff. It does help me cope with it. And it helps me to have like some sort of a aim to jump back on. Okay, so like here's the objective. Seek God, help others. Okay. Why? Because somebody else did that for me, and I've had some experience where when I am doing that, that's when I feel the most free. So I'm going to trust that.
Seek God, help others. Chad's been discipled by AA, and had to go there. Had to hit bottom. Got discipled by AA. Seek God, help others. That's when I feel the most free.
Everything else seems to be a damn mystery.
I had an experience whilst driving across the state in the last couple of weeks. It was a morning and it was misty, and I came around the bend, and as the sun was coming up, it was coming up over the big stupid windmills. It was just like really pretty.
Yeah, this is reality in America, 2022. The big stupid windmills in Europe too.
And I was thinking about like how in the timeline I'm from, Vervaeke's the philosopher king of the Church of the Optimal Grip, and
the philosopher king of the Church of the Optimal Grip. Don't miss these little nuggets. He's putting them out there.
I was like, well, what is the optimal grip? Like in that moment I was thinking about it, and it was like gratitude is the ultimate middle finger for like the horror of the world. Like to be glad you're there anyway, regardless of the circumstance. If you have the internal capacity to turn your orientation to gratitude regardless of the situation, it feels like a win button.
Well, it's like the other day when I jumped on your stream.
Yeah, so gratitude as the win button maybe is a way to orient ourselves again to the aim of where we should be putting our attention, gratitude, and that can maybe get us away from these poles of apocalypse and tyranny and resentment that always are bubbling up. This next one, just another way to think in on this path. Another Peter Thiel clip, a recent speech he gave, and we'll listen to him here.
I'm interested in listening to you, trying to figure out the admixture of optimism and pessimism. Because on the one hand, the past isn't enough, but we should study it. On the other hand, we have to be looking toward the future, but can't be too optimistic, and we have to be realistic. So I suppose I want to ask just a simple question, especially in the midst of this discussion that is up to this point been very pessimistic. Is what does success look like?
Well, I always dislike that question a lot. You know, I tend to think I dislike psychology. We've overdosed on psychology. It's just we've overdosed on therapy. All this nonsense, and optimism and pessimism are just, you know, I think bad forms of psychotherapy. They are you know, they are in some sense at the extreme limit case, they're the same thing. You know, extreme optimism, it's like, okay, you just need to sit back and watch the movie of the future unfold and eat some popcorn. You don't need to do anything. The singularity is near. It's that Ray Kurzweil type thing. That's extreme optimism. Extreme pessimism is, you know, die with dignity, or not very much, but, you know, and nothing you can do. And it's because extreme optimism and extreme pessimism, you know, extreme optimism is denial. Extreme pessimism is acceptance, but they both sum up to sloth. They're both forms of extreme laziness where you're not going to do anything. And so if you had to give, you know, an accurate picture, you know, I'm not sure it's true, but the healthy one is we're somewhere in between. You know, it is not destined that this planet is going to self-destruct. It's not destined that it's going to become a totalitarian one-world state. There is some path in between. It's hard. We shouldn't accept totalitarianism or destruction. You have to fight. You have to work on it, and that's sort of where I always get back to some form of individual human agency. You know, the indomitability of the human spirit, and but it can't be guaranteed. As soon as you make it too optimistic or too pessimistic, that's you're lost.
And that harkens back to the video that Paul was talking about, Rene Girard. So I can't really make a great connection, but the way I was thinking about that is because we've gotten so psychological, you know, just think optimistically. All you need to do is have positive thoughts, and the world will manifest the way you want. That has failed, and that's not the way to go about making the world a better place for yourself, for each other, because it's ignoring these the very real, I guess is the way to bring it back, the very underground currents of society that we're in right now, that Thiel was elaborating before, and that clip on Girard was talking about. We have to fight for, like Thiel was saying there, and Jim was saying before, we have to fight for the good, and we'll see the bad, and so you need to take both sides and aim through the narrow gate. And with that, we'll end with this Jonathan Pageau clip.
When you wake up in the morning and you get out of bed and you open the blinds and you see the sun shining, do you find in yourself this tendency to materialize things or to reduce them down, or is it kind of like an active mental effort you have to put in to try and see things symbolically, or does it get better as time goes on? Is it almost like a habit, or is it more like a switch that goes off?
What do you thinking symbolically, you mean?
Yeah,
I don't
so
know. I
so
don't totally know, like, yeah, I don't totally know why it is that, like, let's say we're able to think this way. It's something that happened to us in some ways. It's not necessarily, it's also a product of our time. Thinking symbolically is not, in some ways, it's a sign that we're in a bad place, because in the normal world, you don't have to think symbolically at all. You just exist. The fact that we think symbolically is actually a sign of alienation. That
Mhm.
the seeing symbolism is a sign of alienation. And so it's like, you don't talk about what it means to shake hands. You just shake hands. You don't explain to people why you would have to sit around the table and eat together, because it has this symbolic element, or why you should participate in this and that religious ritual, because it brings together the different elements towards one. Usually you would just do that. It would be intuitive. You wouldn't have to explain it. And so the fact that, let's say, I'm explaining it means that I actually live in a form of alienation. Like I am alienated, and I'm actually kind of using that alienation against itself, where it's like I'm alienated enough to then look back and see the pattern and say, okay, wait a minute, but this is actually meaningful. Like this is actually meaningful. But this helps people to understand also why. Because often people tell me, like, why don't the church fathers explain symbolism? Why don't they talk about symbolism? And I'm like, they didn't have to explain it. They just had to exist in it. All they did, so they did typology. They would create analogies between, different aspects of the world, but they didn't explain the typologies, and they didn't have to break it down for people who didn't live in that world anymore. But, like, sadly, that's what we have to do. So in some ways, I think it's also important to understand that in some ways, even what I'm doing is from somewhat of an alienated position. And so it's like, it's hard. Let's say it's not natural for me to, like, go to church. It's an effort, right? It's not something that just comes naturally and, like, participate in the liturgy. I enjoy it, and I find great joy and meaning and purpose in it, but it's not something that just kind of flows. I am more modern, and most people are more modern than that.
So in that clip, it's showing where we're at, and even in terms of the symbolic hierarchical thinking, we're so far away from that because of our progress. We just become so atomized that we can't think in these hierarchical structures anymore. But it's so necessary for us to do so to get through these poles of apocalypse and authoritarian tyranny. So that's really the thesis that I wanted to put forward in this video, that we need to pay attention to the hierarchy of being that Jonathan is articulating, and that's going to help us be grateful for the world that we have and the world that we can build together, and to make it prosperous and beautiful for everyone. And yeah, so I'll put every clip in the description, and very interested to hear what your guys' thoughts are on everything. And I'll catch you guys in the next video. Take care.